Hello and a warm welcome to another episode of Focus on This Week. This is a program that offers crucial and significant discussions with the purpose of influencing positive change and, of course, development in Tanzania, in Africa, and in the world at large. Leading the program, I am your host, Caroline Maleo. And, of course, every Wednesday at the same time and on the same day, we'll be together. Today on this episode, we will discuss about the state of Tanzania's economic diplomacy. And as you can already understand, Tanzania had adopted economic diplomacy policy during the leadership of the second president of Tanzania, Ali Hassan Mwinyi, where actually his government at that time targeted to open up the nation's economy. And economic diplomacy was adopted from political diplomacy that was used during the leadership of the first founding father of the nation, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. And of course, to dive deep into today's topic, we're joined by Ambassador Amb Mpungwe. You're mostly welcome, Ambassador Amb.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I really appreciate it.
Well, Ambassador Amb Mpungwe was the first ambassador to the post-apartheid South Africa, but also has more than 25 years of experience in diplomatic and other 25 years of experience in the private sector as a business person. And actually I had talked to him and he told me that he doesn't know if he's a diplomat or if he is a business person because he's there at the middle. You're mostly welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Well, Ambassador Amb, let's first discuss, start our discussion.
Yes.
Can you tell us what do we mean by economic diplomacy? So when we say that Tanzania has adopted economic diplomacy from the leadership of Ali Hassan Mwinyi up to date, what is it that we actually mean?
I think we should start by looking at diplomacy as basically the science and art of managing a country's foreign policy that emanates from domestic policy. And as it relates, all the relationship that relate to the outside world, beginning with the immediate neighborhood, regional relationships, continental relationships, and global relationship. So diplomacy is that art and science that you deploy in managing those relationships and those dynamics. So it's not that a country would ever face this time political diplomacy, this is economic diplomacy, this is tourism diplomacy. You know, it's, usually it's a holistic way of managing resources. Policy. I think what makes it different in different phases is your emphasis in terms of your own domestic developments. What do you want to underscore at that particular moment? As you rightly pointed out, for many years after independence, you know, our foreign policy and therefore our diplomacy was very much focused on liberation issues on the African continent at large, but specifically in Southern Africa. And this took about 3 decades since our independence. But then as the countries of Southern Africa became liberated, and now the shift came from focusing on liberation issues and looking into other aspects of our relationship. And precisely because as apartheid was being dismantled and there were also some internal changes within Tanzania, moving from socialist policies to free market management of the economy, putting the private sector the engine for growth. Therefore, it also required, in addition to the internal measures that were focused on growing the economy, we also had to look outside and see what kind of resources that we can mobilize from the international community that can leverage our own internal efforts. And therefore, that's when emphasis on economic issues came in and what you call economic diplomacy today. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ami, for that explanation. And you clearly explained that the difference is on emphasis. Emphasis on what? Now let's talk about this economic diplomacy that the country opted to put emphasis on it. You were amongst the early people to champion privatization and to champion economic diplomacy in the country. Please tell us the history. What were the challenges in adopting it, and pass us through that history?
Yes, certainly. You know, following the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989, I think, and that was which had collapsed the divide between so-called communist world and capitalist world, the Western world and Eastern world. And for us as Tanzania, we were in between there. We were non-aligned. But then after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, you know, most of the countries in the world adopted free market economic system as the dominant system for managing the economies, and multi-party political system also became a way of managing politics. And for us in Tanzania, we were not different from what was happening in the rest of the world. So we started opening up the economy from state-owned economic management to private sector-driven economic management. And in politics also, we moved from one-party system to multi-party system. So, and I was fortunate coming to defining the Tanzanian economic diplomacy. I was fortunate in two ways. First, because in 1985, when President Mwinyi assumed leadership of our country, I was fortunate enough to be one of the early staffers for the president. So I was part and parcel of his transformation measures, both in politics and in economic. So the idiosyncrasies of what was happening, I came to understand very closely. And, but at the same time, after I went back to the Foreign Service from the status, from being the personal assistant to the president, I went back in 1992, became the ambassador and director for Africa and Middle East. And one of my key areas as a director for Africa and the Foreign Service on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, managing our diplomacy for Africa and Middle East, of course, I was deep into the liberation process many years before I joined the president. So, and that was the time, if you would recall, 1992, Namibia had already been liberated, and I was party to that process. I spent 1 year assisting the Namibians to get their independence. Concurrently, I was also involved in the transitional process for South Africa. So I had some deeper insights. At the same time, I had too many rods in the fire. I was also, as a director for Africa, I was also I was mediating the peace process for Rwanda. So the dynamics of change in this region became quite clear to me. And especially the South African transition, because I was very much involved in formulating the initial framework for the transition. And I could see way back in 1992 that by 1994 was critical, because that was the year for this white South African government to run another election. And we could not see that regime to run another all-white elections. By 1992, it was very clear. By 1994, apartheid would be gone. There would be free and fair, non-racial elections. So, as a director for Africa, having a very strategic role in influencing policy, that's where I can claim to have been one of the initiators, that telling my colleagues that, look here, by 1994, this thing called apartheid will be gone, and therefore, we should start preparing for other aspects of managing our relations within Africa and in the world. Liberation phase is going out. Let's start considering economic issues, which is, and at that time our country was also going through a lot of economic challenges. I think we had to, as a nation, we had to put a lot of focus on economic issues. This was the time when we started liberalizing the economy through World Bank sponsored programs like structural adjustment programs, IMF-driven reforms, which included privatization of state enterprises and encouraging private sector to assume a central role in managing the economy. So it was a long process, for a country which for a long time was running through state controlled economic process to move to private sector driven. It was quite a lot. But we had to do that. We had to do through internal resources. But as you would appreciate, and I'm not an economist, but economists say, for a country to be able to mobilize sufficient investments for domestic investment, your savings to GDP ratio should be at least 30%. But at that time, I think even now, at that time it was even lower. Even today, now our savings to GDP ratio is about 15%. So domestic savings alone are not sufficient to carry through the investment stock that is sufficient to generate and accelerate economic growth. So there is a need for FDI, foreign direct investment. So there was a need to mobilize the international community, investor community, to come to Tanzania. First, through the privatized assets, and secondly, open up other sectors of investments in agriculture, in mining, in tourism, in livestock, and as Tanzanians, we are quite aware, and sometimes this is also a drawback. It's a country which is well endowed with different resources. We have history, a long history of absolute peace and stability since independence. We have geography, a coastal state that's surrounded by long landlocked neighbors, which is huge opportunity for logistics, for imports and exports, the transit business. We have our geology is equally exciting. Apart from geography and history, the geology is also very exciting. And above that geology, we have a huge landmass of, very fertile, well-watered, and so on and so on. Forestry, livestock, second largest livestock population in Africa. So the assets are there. So deal with internal investment, but also mobilize foreign investments. And as you know, to have these resources transform into wealth and improve the welfare of your people, you need three things, basically.
What are those?
You need capital, you need technology, and you need high-level skills. And these are, we have our own, but they're not sufficient. You have to get from outside. And that's where the economic diplomacy was focusing, mobilizing this capital, mobilizing technology, mobilizing skills. And these are highly mobile issues, factors. of economic growth. They move where they're welcome, they move where they're secure, they move where there's opportunity for growth, they move where there's stability and predictability. So it involved a lot of things. Yeah, far and above the capacity and capability of diplomats alone.
Yeah.
It depends on how your internal policies, your institutions of governance on various aspects of policy, of legal framework, and your fiscal regime, and how it attracts and incentivizes your regulatory environment and predictability and all these things. So a lot of these issues are outside the control of the foreign ministry or diplomats. But diplomats are there just to outline and mobilize externally based on what it exists within the country.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ami.
Yeah.
With what you were explaining, I got so many questions that I want to ask. So, of course, I'm going to shoot them.
Yeah.
So you explained about the fact that with economic diplomacy, it attracts other people from out of the country. And if there is good investment environment, if there's good environment, they would want to come and invest. Yeah. But I'm wondering, how do we strike a balance between benefiting from these partnerships that are brought by economic diplomacy while ensuring that we protect our culture, our ways of life, and we actually get this sustainable development that are brought by economic diplomacy?
Yeah, certainly it's important. And this, to me personally, and I'm sure my colleagues in the Foreign Service, this has been the challenge. Initially, some of us who started talking about economic diplomacy during the transition from the socialist system to the free market system. Initial stages, some of us, I remember personally going through those kind of criticism that all these guys are selling the country. And for me, it was even worse. I was accused of selling the country to the Kaburus, because the entire psyche was against South Africa, and especially white South Africans during the struggle. So it was a tough situation. It very much depended on how the political organization within the country focus on those issues. And you're correct. Whatever you do to mobilize FDI, foreign direct investment, at the core of it, I think the ownership of this process should still be local. And your citizens must be in the forefront of this economic transformation.
Ambassador, I'm curious with what you were explaining.
Yes.
Do our locals at the center of our economic diplomacy? Are they really leveraging the opportunities that are brought by the economic diplomacy?
Well, as I said at the very beginning, we at the Foreign Service, we diplomats, manage what it is organized within the country. We don't formulate our own policies on economy, So the point I'm making here, and in that regard, I'm agreeing with you that the locals should be at the center stage of this economic transformation, of any transformation, even if it is political transformation. You can't rely on your political transformation through foreigners or observers from outside. It should be your own. It's your own process. So the point I'm making here, you're quite correct that for that economic transformation to have strong roots and traction, you have to have a way of leveraging and involving your own people. There must be a sense of ownership of the economy by the people themselves. And that's where you can have a process that is successful and sustainable. If it is not rooted on this local ownership or sense of ownership of your economy, and have your citizenry participate in that process, then you're in trouble. And that's why, as I said, in the initial stages of when we were talking about economic diplomacy, some of us were very much challenged, and rightly so. We were seen as, we were sent outside to sell the country cheap. So, and this, not only in terms of explaining, I personally believe in it. And outside what we're talking here, even my personal decision to resign from the government and get into the private sector, it was not any kind of protest. It was acquiring, at personal level, acquiring that sense of purpose, something that will make you wake up in the morning and want to do. At that time, for someone who had spent a lot of time on liberation issues, and here comes, apartheid is gone, you lose your sense of purpose. So for me, even my decision to prematurely retire from the Foreign Service, I retired at 48, was to, at personal level, to find a new sense of purpose. It's something that will make me wake up early in the morning. And,
and Ambassador Ami, I am really enjoying the things that you're telling me, but I think we should go back to economic diplomacy. You mentioned that the diplomacy in a country actually, with how it is run, it is determined with the policies that are in that country. So I want to ask, we know recently that President Samia launched the new foreign policy in the country.
Revised foreign policy.
Yes. So can you tell us, how does that revised new policy influence our economic diplomacy?
I was not leading you astray. I was just giving you the background that the centrality of having your local population be part of the economic transformation. They have to be players, not onlookers, not spectators, not passive spectators. I was using my personal experience as an example to that. But yes, since then, I think a lot of efforts has been to both to encourage FDI, foreign direct investment, but also to have locals participate in the running of the economy. We haven't done much. We still have a long way to go, but it is important that the locals become part of the ownership of the economic transformation of their country. Now, with the new foreign policy, or revised foreign policy, which was launched by the president not too long ago, certainly because domestically, the pace of getting the private sector as an engine of growth has gone so far, and the response, global response, has been quite positive. I think the new foreign policy is re-energizing that process and making it more clearer, and articulating the readiness, the enhanced readiness of the country to accommodate or to invite foreign direct investment in terms of capital, in terms of technology, in terms of high-skilled, and especially now that we are living in this new era of complexities in geopolitics, complexities in what is coming through the disruptive technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. So the world is moving very fast. And I think this new foreign policy is aimed at remaining at the same pace with how the world is transforming, so that Tanzania becomes part of, becomes very relevant in its relations with the outside world, especially on the economic front.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ami. Indeed, you've explained how the foreign policy puts Tanzania forward in leveraging these international ties. Yes. When we look at the Africa Continental Free Trade,
Yes.
And when we look at Tanzania being in a very strategic location as a land with other landlocked countries, and I think you had explained this before.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, do you think that we are really leveraging these opportunities that we have for our own economic prosperity?
Yeah, at the end of the day, when you talk about trade, you're talking about the market. You should therefore be talking about your production capacities internally. You know, the markets are there, but are you capitalizing your resources enough? Are you enhancing your production fast enough to be able to take advantage of the market's opportunities that exist within the region, within the continent, and I think within the region and within the continent, we have all the advantages in terms of short-end supply chains and all these things. But also, you know, leveraging the opportunities that are opening up from the rest of the world. So, yes, continental free trade area is there, but our success and our ability to be able to optimize the opportunities that presents itself with that continental free trade area depends on the level of internal production. Are we enhancing our production? First increasing, mobilizing domestic and international investment active enough? Are we leveraging internal production, you know, now that the markets are there, or opportunities to the market are available? Are we producing enough in a very competitive way to take full advantage of those opportunities? And these are the kind of conversations that are being triggered when we discuss about our new foreign policy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ami.
Right.
And what do you think with the questions that you were asking? Do you think...
Yeah. I'm a very frustrated person when it comes to that. And my frustration comes out of this paradox that end up, as I outlined, we Tanzanians, like a church prayer or Quranic verse, you know, we're very fond of itemizing of what the things we have. History, geography, geology, good land, and all these things. So potentially we're extremely rich. You know, we have all these resources that not so many countries have. Yet we are poor. It's a paradox. You can't be rich and poor at the same time. So I think time has come now in dealing with this paradox. We should change our narrative from focusing on things we have, a long list of things. Let's find out the things we don't have. That if we can mobilize and get, will make the things we have produce wealth, produce growth, produce better life to our people.
What are those things that we should focus on that we do not have? Technology?
As I said, you need capital.
Technology?
Because your internal capital generation capacity is limited. You need capital, you need technology, you need high-level skills.
Definitely.
Yeah, and as we're moving now in this fourth industrial revolution, digital transformation, AI and all these things, it's a different set of skills now you also need, a different set of technology that you need. And even there, we are still lucky because when it comes to adapting these disruptive technologies, at the center of it is data. And a lot of these resources that I've mentioned, you know, there's a lot of data. And the proponents of fourth industrial revolution, they say, those who are quite active in the disruptive technology space, that any human activity, be it economic or social, that has data is a good candidate for exponential growth. And this is where I come back to my frustration, this paradox, rich and poor at the same time. Yeah, we are not, for us to get rid of that unsustainable poverty that characterizes our society today, you can't deal with it with linear growth. You can't effectively deal with these unsustainable poverty levels that characterize our country at the moment through linear growth. It has to be exponential. And the easiest way to get exponential growth that will dent the poverty level is through disruptive technologies. So what is our capacity to adopt that in terms of policy, in terms of legal framework, in terms of fiscal regime, in terms of regulatory environment, that would encourage these disruptive technologies to gain roots and to be able to kickstart the exponential growth pathway.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for that explanation. TBC One viewers, if you're just tuning on TBC One right now, the program on air is focused on this week. And actually today we are discussing about the state of Tanzania's economic policy. And we are here with Ambassador Amb Mpungwe, and we're actually diving into this topic. Ambassador Amb, let's talk about something else.
Maybe before we go to something else,
okay.
Especially the exponential growth that would deal with this paradox, rich and poor at the same time. And this is, you should also look into, when it comes to your workforce of the future. That will be consistent with these disruptive technologies that are covering. Now, every day you hear about AI and all these things. So the conversation should also be around not only how do we move into this fourth industrial revolution, but how do you prepare your workforce of the future? Because the workforce of the future will be far different from now. And therefore, conversation about your education system. Is your education system producing the skilled personnel that would be consistent with what is happening? What I'm saying, our conversation should be very futuristic. The future of agriculture. How do you move from primitive agriculture that we have and to take full advantage of the disruptive technologies that are there? Well, there's a lot of data there. Where I am in Ifakara, the peasant farmer who farms rice, there's a lot of data on the soil fertility, moisture levels, and temperatures, and all these things. But it goes uncaptured. And the poor peasant just ignores all those. But those, those data could be taken and be
actually essential.
Essential. So the point I'm making, we are at a stage of our country's development that we should also be futuristic in our conversations. Our education, our agriculture, our mining, every endeavor that we are doing, we have to take cognizance of the global environment that we are operating in, that is moving towards a different direction.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ambassador Amb. We really need to be futuristic in all that we do.
Very intentional.
Very intentional.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Ambassador Amb, let's talk about when you were explaining at first, you were involved in the liberation period during that time. And I'm sure emphasis was put on African unity. And we won't say that we have achieved economic diplomacy in our country effectively with our neighboring countries if there are some parts of the countries in the region that are not having peace. Now let's talk about the ongoing conflicts in some of the African countries.
You're taking me back to my past. Okay. I can deal with that.
Okay, you're going to explain that. So let's talk about the issues that are going on, let's say in the DR Congo, between the DR Congo and Rwanda. We see that there was a peace agreement that was signed in Washington recently. And then we look again, recently there was a peace agreement that was signed between DR Congo and the M23 in Qatar. Why are we solving our problems out of the globe? Is it that we do not have better ways to solve our challenges now? Why was it possible back then during that time that you were in the liberation
You're asking a wrong person. You're asking a person, you know, throughout my diplomatic career, I grew up in the profession during the liberation struggle, and we were managing a lot of these processes ourselves within the frontline states. We were in total control of, you know, what is happening. How do you strategize? How do you deal with the big powers? How do you maneuver around those big powers? And we were quite successful as frontline states. Even our diplomacy was admired by both friends and foes. I remember reading a book by Chester Crocker, High Noon in Southern Africa, Making Peace in Troubled Neighborhood. He wasn't a friend of Frontline, but at one stage in his book, he admits that it was a unique set of diplomacy. You know, you touch Zambian ambassador in Tokyo and Tanzanian ambassador in Ottawa, and Botswana ambassador in Brussels on an issue in Southern Africa. They will all give you same or similar response. We were closely coordinating our issues, and we were quite effective running through the diplomacy of liberation in Southern Africa. And in fact, the rest of the world was depending on us. The position, the diplomacy piece that the frontline states would put in place would be the OU position, it would be the non-aligned position, and through the non-aligned influence, it would be the UN General Assembly position, it would be the UN position. So we were quite effective. And we made some efforts during my time. I remember when I was director for Africa, 1992, we, as a continent, having seen what was happening in the rest of the world, we didn't fold our hands and we didn't give up. We were proactive as a continent, as OU. I think initially it was the Secretary General then, Salim Mohammed Salim. He came with a huge initiative which was adopted as the position of the heads of state and government in Africa on global changes and Africa's response, issues of democracy, human rights, good governance, rule of law. You know, we said this is a part and parcel of transformation, of modernizing the continent. But also, we realized we can't do all these things, including economic issues, while you are still pointing guns to each other. So I remember I was in government then. I was director of Africa, as I said. In 1992, we began a process in Dakar, Senegal, to put together a mechanism for conflict prevention, management, and resolution, which unfortunately we couldn't adopt at that OAU summit in 1992, but we adopted it in Cairo in 1993, in June 1993, a mechanism for conflict management resolution in Africa. So making a point that Africa could resolve its own conflicts. And again, since we are personalizing this conversation, at that time I had done Namibia, we were in the process for South Africa, but I was also representing President Mwinyi as mediator for the Rwandese conflict in Arusha. We began that process in June 1992, the Arusha peace process. And by, what is today, August 4th? Exactly August 4th in 1993, we got the Arusha peace process, peace agreement. So this was a huge conflict, which had, prior to our assuming leadership of the negotiating process, President Mobutu was mediating it from 1989 when the war broke out until 1992. So we took over, and we managed to get a peace agreement. We signed it off on the 4th of August 1993. And our mandate was to get the peace agreement, which we did.
If I can recall,
yeah.
After that peace agreement, then the genocide occurred?
No. After that peace agreement, our mandate was to negotiate that peace agreement.
Yes.
That was our mandate as Tanzania. And in collaboration with our neighbors and the international community, the French were there, the Germans were there, the Belgians were there, the Americans were there. So, and the UN was also represented, the OU was there. So, but we were there for 13 months in Arusha, negotiating that peace agreement, which we got it on the 4th of August 1993. And that was the end of our mandate as Tanzania. We handed over that agreement to the UN for implementation, because it required more resources in mobilizing, peacekeeping forces, in managing the transitional process, the various aspects of the transition, supervising the ceasefire agreement, getting refugees and displaced persons back, disarming the forces, creating a new army, creating new institutions of governance and all these things, setting up transitional government of national unity, the National Assembly. So it was a long but very comprehensive process that required more resources than what Tanzania could afford. So we handed it over to the UN, and unfortunately, and I'll be very frank, this is where my biggest frustration with the UN remains, that and in spite of several reminders during the negotiation process, that look here, these timelines that we are negotiating here in Arusha are quite tight and they're well negotiated. Please start running the process. We know how bureaucratic the UN is. Before you get engaged into a peacekeeping mission or any conflict management process, you have to send a reconnaissance mission. The reconnaissance mission has to write a report to the Secretary General. The Secretary General has to get enabling resolution from the Security Council to be able to get a budget, to mobilize troops. We kept on reminding you guys, you start preparing for this. This process has got very tight timelines. But unfortunately, when we handed it over to them, they played around with it. And the UN, which the two senior most leaders were Africans. Boutros Ghali was the Secretary General. Kofi Annan was the head of peacekeeping. They played around with it, unfortunately, until hell broke loose in April 1994 at the cost of 1 million innocent lives within 100 days.
So that was after you guys had the peace agreement, but you handed it over to the United Nations?
For implementation.
For implementation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you have explained that. So what is it that we need to solve our own ongoing conflicts?
Yes. As I told you,
when you're explaining, can you tell us how can we strengthen our own institutions like SADC, East African Community?
Okay. As I told you, fortunately, during my 25 years of foreign service, I was very much involved in these issues of conflict. Yeah, different conflicts have different models for their resolution, rather. I feel very revolutionary today. You've taken me back to my revolutionary days. Yeah, I mean, for instance, within the frontline states, we had these frontline states summits, one-day summit. And there's a summit in Harare, a summit in Lusaka, summit in Dar es Salaam. Leaders come, they meet. Yeah, I remember very interesting. Leaders will meet. For us as officials, we'll be locked out. We'll be asked to write communiques for discussions that we are not privy to. But we are very busy dealing with you journalists. You used to write fictitious communiques. But the leaders will lock themselves and be very open and frank with each other. So within one day, a summit in Lusaka or Harare or Dar es Salaam, one-day summit, they are very focused. They deal with the issue head-on, very frank with each other. So it was easier and very effective tool for the frontline states diplomacy in dealing with the conflicts in Southern Africa. Different conflicts have different characters. It's not one size fits all. And that's why I told you, when I was given responsibility to mediate the Rwandese conflicts in 1992, we took over from a process that was led by President Mobutu, the former president of DRC, Seko. Yeah, because when the war broke out in 1989, he was the most senior leader in the region, and this is how our diplomacy, African diplomacy is. You go for the most senior, not the most capable. So Mobutu was the most senior, so he led that peace process, which was called Nsele peace process. Started in Nsele, where he usually resided. They went to Gabolite, his home village. They went to Kampala, they came to Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar. They went all over. But the typical, this way of resolving African conflicts, one-day summits. But that process went for 2 years without succeeding. And the war was intensifying. And unfortunately, these one-day summits, they're very long in protocol, but very short in detail. Yeah,
What does that mean?
Well, when you have a summit, peace summit, and the leaders, if it is Lusaka or Dar es Salaam or Harare, leaders start arriving in the morning. There's traditional dances at the airport. Each leader, a small parade, inspector parade, and then when the last one arrives, it's lunchtime, you go for lunch, and then you resume after lunch. You read written speeches from headquarters. You can resolve this low-intensity conflicts, but for deep-rooted conflicts like the one we had in Rwanda, these one-day summits were proven to be ineffective. That's when both the Rwandese parties, both the RPF and the government, felt that that process was not succeeding. In fact, in 1992, they met in Brussels and Paris when they decided to ask us, Tanzania, because that process was not succeeding. That's when they came to us, and just to give you a quick, when we were given a responsibility to deal with it, we discarded the summitry approach because the long in protocol, very short in detail. So we had to change the framework for negotiations. We had to study the conflict in detail in its historical and prevailing dynamics, and we realized it was not an ordinary, normal conflict. It was deep-rooted, characterized by deep mistrust, mutual suspicion, contempt, insecurity, search for security for my children's children, It's about esteem, very emotive issues. And you can't deal with those issues in one day summit. Never. Yeah, we spent 13 months. So that's when we put our mediating framework together. That's when we accepted. We told the OAU and the UN, yes, we'll do. But I advised to President Mwinyi that President Mobutu is still the leader of this process. He has proven unable to resolve it. But he's a person of big ego. Yeah, we cannot just dismiss him. So we retained, in our model, we retained Mobutu as the mediator, and President Mwinyi became the facilitator, and I became his representative. So we had a framework, stretched it, different phases, and we use the foreign ministers, prime ministers, and presidents as lever, four-wheel drive. Wherever we get stuck, that's when we go to foreign minister or to prime minister or to the president. Unfortunately for our process, we didn't involve the presidents until when they came on. We started in June 1992. The presidents were only involved in August 1994, on 4th of August, to witness the signing of the peace agreement. So what am I saying? I'm saying there are different approaches to resolving conflicts. The one-day summits worked very effectively during the frontline states. But the one-day summit cannot work on a deep-rooted conflict like what is happening in the Eastern DRC. It's a deep-rooted conflict. And unfortunately, I don't know, I'm out of service. I don't know why SADC and East African countries rushed for military solutions. That's a rough neighborhood. That's a very violent neighborhood. It needs a political solution, not a military solution.
A political solution, indeed.
Yes.
And Ambassador Ami, we know that President Samia Suluhu Hassan is the chairperson of the SADC Troika.
Yes.
But also, Tanzania has held the 27th Ministerial Conference on SADC just 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Can you tell us how can other countries learn from Tanzania in African unity in just 1 minute?
1 minute, first the Troika, some of us were involved in creating it in 1995 in Gaborone. We were trying to get to take the legacy of frontline states, that capacity and ability to respond quickly to regional conflicts. That legacy, we thought the frontline states should not disappear with apartheid. We should that experience, that mechanism of resolving internal conflicts, and we created the organ, and with the troika of leadership, so that you provide continuity. So I'm glad that machinery still works, and it's good that our president has been chairing it. Yeah, and it's more effective than the one-day summit.
Okay.
Yes.
And Ambassador, just one last thing.
Yeah.
What is your advice to young aspiring diplomats? Just in half a minute.
Half a minute. Understand your domestic policies very well, and understand the dynamics of global change. And this world is moving very fast. So the profound knowledge about what is happening within your country, and profound knowledge, understanding the dynamics of global change would help to make a young diplomat quite effective in his or her approaches to the profession.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ami. Indeed, understanding the dynamics of the diplomatic shifts.
Yes.
Ambassador Ami, thank you so much for your time and for all the explanations that you have provided.
I hope I didn't confuse you.
You didn't.
My prolonged explanation.
Actually, you didn't. I enjoyed conversating with you. Thank you so
very much. I really appreciate it.
Dear TBC1 viewers, if you are watching our program today, the program on air was focused on this week, and we were discussing about Tanzania's economic diplomacy policy. And actually, I hope that there's a lot that you have learned regarding the topic. Leading the program, I was your host, Caroline Maleo. Until next time, bye-bye.